Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Monday, June 24th, 2024. Ray McGovern joins us now. Ray, no matter what we're talking about, it's a pleasure, my dear friend, and thank you for joining us.
Welcome.
Why, in your understanding, we'll get right to the hot news this morning, did the United States deliver, under the guise of Ukrainian military, cluster bombs killing children on a Russian beach in Sevastopol over the weekend?
Beats the hell out of me, Judge. The only explanation here is that Anthony Blinken and Jacob Sullivan are still acting out of this paradigm that they can do whatever the hell they want. They gave these ATACMS missiles. It's short for Army Tactical Missile System. That's all that means. They have a range of 300 kilometers, so that's 190 miles. And they've told the Ukrainians and they've told the world openly, look, you can hit what you want. Okay, now these were fired at Crimea. 4 of them apparently were knocked down. This one got through, and not only that, but it had cluster munitions. You remember this time last year when the U.S. ran out of 155 millimeter artillery shells, and Sullivan and Blinken and Austin said, well, we have these cluster munitions banned by most countries, but we'll use them anyway. Okay, well, that's what was on the end of these ATACMS missiles, and that's why there are so many, about 150 or so at last count, civilian casualties on the beach in Sevastopol. The big news, of course, is the Russians immediately blamed the U.S. as well as the Ukrainians, saying once again that the Ukrainians couldn't possibly do this without intelligence support from the U.S., and that happens to be true.
Here's, I'm going to read this, Dmitry Peskov, who's the Kremlin principal spokesperson, just an hour ago, quote, "You should ask my colleagues in Europe and above all in Washington, the press secretaries, why their governments are killing Russian children. Just ask them this question." I mean, that has to be a red line, if anything is. There's the beach. You can see sunbathers in the foreground. In the background, you can see the explosions from the cluster bombs made in the United States, delivered by the United States, and as we understand from you and Larry Johnson and Scott Ritter, triggered by the United States because of the security codes necessary to set these things off.
At last count, there have been 6 children killed. One of them was the daughter, 9 years old, mind you, of the deputy mayor out there in Magadan province in the far east of Russia. They were doing their thing at the beach, and that's what happened. Now, the chattering classes there, the shows last night, Solovyov, for example, the most important show, he's pretty close to the Kremlin. He had people saying, well, in reaction, we should level Kharkov. And apparently the head of RT, Simonyan, said, no, Kiev, we should level Kiev. And how about Odessa? Yeah, that's what our reaction should be. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, but I've been wrong before. I don't think that Putin is under such pressure that he would take such extreme measures. I think it would suffice for him to keep doing what he's doing. A vast percentage of Ukrainian power is out now. They're going to have real problems when the fall and the winter come. The attrition is continuing, and it can be speeded up, depending on how quickly Putin wants to move west. So the background for me is they have the upper hand, and these can be looked on as very embarrassing pinpricks but enhancing the solidarity that Russian people. This was a very important and a feast day for the Russians, Trinity Sunday, which ironically has a special flair for honoring children. Okay, so the propaganda here is the value is terrific. How will the Russians respond? Well, we know one thing, that they're holding the U.S. responsible as well as the Ukrainians. Exactly what they'll do, they have all kinds of symmetrical and asymmetrical responses to do, and they can do it in the Far East with the arrival of a new aircraft carrier from the U.S. in South Korea, mind you. What is it? Teddy Roosevelt. So all indications are that Austin and the people that are running all these policies are Teddy Roosevelt, like charge ahead, and God knows what kind of provocation so somebody will perpetrate to get us involved in an open fighting war, either in that part of the world, the Far East, or in Europe.
Could these missiles have been aimed without American intelligence? Or stated differently, is it more likely than not, or is it a given that American intelligence was involved in this attack?
That's the $64 question. In my view, it's a given that not only the ATACMS, but the programming in the ATACMS had to be at least enabled by Americans. Now, you may have had a Ukrainian, you no longer pull the trigger, you push a button, right? Okay, that's probably what happened, but I can't swear to that. The ATACMS are not the be all and end all here. They do have a 190-mile range, which is big,
Right.
but they're among the most sophisticated things in play here. But the Storm Shadow, the Scalp, and
what will the U.S. say? I mean, will the U.S. claim that it knows nothing about it? Will the U.S. say it was a mistake? We were aiming at a Russian air base 50 kilometers away. How could they possibly justify the slaughter of children?
Well, Judge, when John Kirby is asked this later today, he'd probably say, look, the Ukrainians are capable and able to retaliate for all those indignities and all those attacks that the Russians have made on Ukraine. We have given them permission. What they do is their business. And in reality, as you and I have already explained, it's our business as well. We could and we should rein them in.
Here's a statement. I will read it aloud. We only have it as a full screen, from Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov yesterday, Sunday, June 23rd. The U.S. is responsible for this massacre, and they will get an answer. All flight missions for American ATACMS missiles are programmed by American specialists based on their own U.S. satellite intelligence data. Therefore, the responsibility for the deliberate missile strike against the civilian population of Sevastopol lies primarily with Washington, which supplied this weapon to Ukraine, as well as with the Kyiv regime, from whose territory this strike was launched. Such actions will not go unanswered. Can you blame him? Is he serious?
Yeah, the question is what the answer will be. That's the conundrum. If you take 3 steps back and you consider Putin still a very circumspect leader, you got to realize that, look, we have the upper hand in Ukraine. The West is in quite some dilemma with respect to elections coming up, and not only in the United States, but elsewhere. Let's keep our powder dry. Let's keep it a tridding, and let's maybe allow an attack on U.S. forces in Iraq or Iran, or not Iran, but Iraq or Syria. Let's do little symmetrical or asymmetrical attacks. Let's show the flag in and around Havana with our most advanced warships. And let's warn the United States that, look, we don't want it to come to this, but you should know that the USS Teddy Roosevelt or the USS Eisenhower, they're sitting ducks, they're antiquated weaponry, they're big, big targets. So let's not go that far. Let's rein in these crazies.
Chris, put up the full screen from Minister Lavrov again. So we don't know if U.S. satellite intelligence data was used, but the Russians obviously believe it. Ritter says it's impossible to deploy those things without U.S. satellite intelligence data. This is probably, correct me if I'm wrong, Ray, more likely to be the DIA than the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency. Take it from there.
Well, the satellite data is available. That's clear. When it's put into these ATACMS programs, it's there. It comes from the U.S. So there's no doubt about the U.S. being responsible ultimately for this kind of thing. Who pushed the button? That's an academic question, it seems to me. The more so since the Russians are making it an academic question. They're holding us responsible. What they will do in terms of reaction is really the big question right now. I just don't know, but I don't think they're going to level Kharkov or Odessa or Kiev just now. Realize they don't have to. They can move on to the Dnieper River probably within weeks before the U.S. election and pose that dilemma to the candidates.
We're going to take a break for a commercial announcement. When we come back, I'm going to ask Ray McGovern about Mossad agents in the Pentagon. But first, this. You all know that I am a paid spokesperson for Lear Capital, but I'm also a customer, a very satisfied customer. About a year ago, I bought gold, and it's now increased in value 23%. So $100 invested in gold a year ago is now worth $123. If you have $100 in the bank, it still shows $100, but $100 in the bank is now worth 24% less. Inflation has reduced all of your savings, all of your buying power, and mine, by 24%. And gold is largely immune from that. If you want to learn how gold will soon hit $3,200 an ounce, call Lear Capital, 800-511-4620, or go to LearJudgeSnap.com. Get your free gold report. Same experts who predicted the 23% rise that I've enjoyed have predicted this $3,200 an ounce gold. Learn about how to transfer this to an IRA. Protect your savings. 800-511-4620, LearJudgeSnap.com. Tell them the judge sent you. Ray, before we get to the Mossad and the Pentagon, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, here's the latest from the Associated Press. This just came out a few minutes ago. The Russian ministry summoned the American ambassador on Monday to protest what it says was the use of U.S.-made advanced missiles in a Ukrainian attack on Russian annexed Crimea that reportedly killed 4 people and wounded more than 150. Washington, quote, has effectively become a party, closed quote, to the war on Ukraine's side, the ministry said in a statement, adding, quote, retaliatory measures will certainly follow, closed quote. It did not elaborate. There was no immediate comment from U.S. or Ukrainian officials. The Associated Press could not independently verify Russia's claims about the missiles used, but it's kind of obvious and we understand it. Sounds to me as though this is getting more dangerous pretty quickly, maybe even quicker than Blinken, Biden, and Sullivan and Austin expected.
Well, it's hard to understand what they expect. What they come from is a paradigm where the U.S. is all powerful, exceptional, indispensable. They still think that way. Now, when they use the Ukrainians in this way, it becomes more and more flagrant what they're doing, and the Russians will retaliate. I don't know what form it will take, but I still think that Putin is circumspect enough to retaliate in kind in terms of killing or damaging most sites in Ukraine. Now, he knows where U.S. advisors are in Ukraine. That would be, in my view, his first choice. Send one of those mega bombs over those kinds of facilities and sort of try to teach the U.S. a lesson. There will be no body bag coming back to Dover Air Force Base, but there would be a number of U.S. advisors and other people killed in the process.
Last week, you and Larry and I alluded to comments made by Colonel Larry Wilkerson about Douglas Feith and others permitting Mossad agents, Israeli secret intelligence agents, access to the Pentagon without any security clearance, without going through a magnetometer, without any check on them whatsoever. Is this true as far as you know?
It is true, and we have unimpeachable sources to tell us it's true, namely Karen Katowski, one of our veteran intelligence professionals for sanity and a guest on your show. She was sitting there. She was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force at the time. She watched these guys come in, not only Mossad, mind you, but the IDF, the high-level generals. And this was before Iraq, okay? Now, I've always said that the reasons we really did Iraq was Israel, the permanent military bases that we coveted in Iraq, and oil. Now, over the years, I've become more and more convinced that it was mostly Israel, because Israel saw its interests in deposing Saddam Hussein, making Iraq a basket case, and eliminating that threat from Iraq. And the people like Douglas Feith, who was briefed by the CIA, but was really working for Cheney, okay, and had this little group manufacturing evidence not only about weapons of mass destruction, but also about putative ties between Al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein. Implication or conclusion, Saddam Hussein was at least in part responsible for 9/11. We went into Iraq. About 80% of the American people believed that Saddam Hussein, bad as he was with WD and all that stuff, he also had a role in what happened in New York and Washington on 9/11. So it was a masterful coup in terms of propaganda. And I just would say about Israeli influence, you go back to 2001, right? George W. Bush is in, and he holds his first cabinet meeting. And he says, "Hey, any of you guys know about Ariel Sharon?" Powell, "Yeah, I've met him, yeah." "Well, I think he's really a great guy. I think we should give him his head. Let him do what he wants there." Powell, "Well, that would be not so good for the Palestinians." "Well, I've been there. I've seen that. That's a basket case. Let him have his head." Now, in my view, Powell might have thought of resigning on the spot, but that was the attitude.
What does that phrase, "let him have his head," mean?
Yeah, let him go ahead and do what he wants to the Palestinians. I mean, he's our friend, and look at him; he's a real strong guy. He's all the things that I pretend to be, says George W. Bush. And I've talked to him. Actually, I flew, says George W. Bush. I flew over the occupied territories with Sharon, and I looked down there, and I said, "Oh my God, that's awful situation down there. Terrible living things." But doesn't matter. Let Sharon do what he wants. And of course, Sharon got the word. Now, next thing you know, we're in war, okay? We're in war against one of Israel's foremost enemies, Saddam Hussein, in Iraq. It got so bad that General Brent Scowcroft, okay, who was at the time head of the President's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board, pretty prestigious place, and a place in possession of all the classified information, he went to the Financial Times and he said, "You know what? Ariel Sharon has our president wrapped around his little finger. He has our president mesmerized. Scowcroft's words. Now, Scowcroft was the epitome of a discreet person talking to the press. What did he want to do? He wanted to tell American people, look, this damn war in Iraq is largely due to the fact that Sharon, the predecessor of one of the predecessors of Netanyahu, has George W. Bush and Cheney wrapped around their little fingers. Okay, so that was then, and fast forward to now, you have a president who thinks that he needs to make sure that he satisfies Netanyahu's every whim so that he can win an election in our country. It's come to that. So the Israeli influence is still very high. The Israeli defense minister is talking to his counterpart, General Austin, or Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, yesterday and today. They're talking about what happened in Gaza. Well, we didn't win like we're supposed to, say the Israelis. Now we're going to go in north to give Hezbollah a bloody nose. Well, now, if Austin has any sense at all, he'll listen to his intelligence advisors who are saying there's no chance that the Israelis can try to do what they did to Hezbollah back in 2006, where they lost. This time, they're going to lose big with hits on Israeli cities, because Hezbollah has so many armaments, has so many missiles to fire and other sophisticated things that they won't succeed. The Israelis will not succeed. So the Israelis are facing a two-front war, Gaza, and then up there in the north against Hezbollah. And down to the Red Sea, the Houthis are still raising havoc and ruining the Israeli economy by preventing the passage of ships bound for Israel. Add to that the fact that the USS Eisenhower, I guess, another one of these really expensive, really very modern 30 years ago, 40 years ago ships, just decided, well, the Houthis are giving us a lot of grief. Let's get out of here and go back to Norfolk for repairs. Half of our aircraft carriers are in repair. We have one in, what is it, the Vincent, I guess, is up in Yokohama. And then we have the Teddy Roosevelt now docks in South Korea. And now the Eisenhower is going back to Norfolk. I don't know where the others are, but we only have a discrete number. Some of them are in repair. Others do not have the proper complement of sailors and airmen to man them.
Does Mossad, when George W. Bush made that statement and Secretary of State Colin Powell responded, was Mossad listening?
They don't have to have audio. They've got entree to many of the people right at that cabinet meeting. Imagine that Rumsfeld or Feith or Wolfowitz were there. They're in such close coordination. I mean, that's precisely why Scowcroft talked about Sharon wrapping George W. Bush around a little finger. Now, as soon as 9/11 happened, Sharon drove his tanks into Jenin and other parts of the West Bank. I mean, this guy is a master player, dead now, we think. He's sort of got his own tomb there. But he played the U.S., he played Bush and Cheney. Of course, Bush and Cheney wanted to do some of this stuff themselves, but they looked at Sharon as a kind of a paradigm of a tough guy who didn't care much about using his influence and his strength to achieve his aims. And that's what Scowcroft was really complaining about in an unprecedented interview.
And Scowcroft was Bush's father's best friend.
Yeah.
It's really said about the son wrapped around the finger. Here's President Putin, just on June 20th, referencing elections in Europe and the upcoming American presidential election. Number 3, Chris.
The Americans, the Europeans are pushing the Ukrainians towards paying any price. Let me emphasize that to pay any price to try and push our troops, our soldiers out towards our border, and they want to present that as some kind of a major success of 2024, given the upcoming NATO summit and then the presidential election in the United States. We'll see what happens.
Tell me he doesn't understand exactly what's going on.
Well, he does. And what we're looking at now are the troops that are amassed around Kharkov, and the Ukrainian forces are coming at them. Now, this is kind of a new counteroffensive by Ukrainian forces. And the Russians just kind of waiting there. Okay, come on, you want to be decimated just like last year? Come along, okay? But the people masterminding all this think that by some ruse, Ukraine can prevail in this next counteroffensive, and that will be in time for the election. There's some success could be advertised. It betrays, in my view, a complete lack of understanding of the balance of power between the forces, a complete lack of understanding on the part of Defense Secretary Austin. He should be telling them, look, don't send any more young Ukrainian untrained troops against the Russians. They're going to get decimated. And the answer will be from Sullivan and Blinken, look, it's worth a try. If there's some success that we could advertise before the election, that's enough for us. Doesn't matter what happens after the election. It's just so unreal that they really expect this. And Putin is aware of this. I mean, you could see the force deployments the Ukrainians are massing against Kharkov, and we'll have to see what happens in terms of how much they are treated, which is the new predicate adjective used for Putin's tactics.
Wow. My adjective for you is brilliant and courageous. My two adjectives. Wonderful, Ray. Thank you very much for this extraordinary analysis, going back into history and tying it in to the present conflagrations. We'll see what the world is like when we meet next with our buddy Larry on Friday afternoon, as usual. Thank you, my friend. Have a great week.
Most welcome.
The aforesaid Larry, as in Larry Johnson, up at 11 o'clock this morning, Eastern, of course, at 2 o'clock this afternoon, Eastern, Kyle Anzalone, and at 4:30 this afternoon, Eastern, the inimitable Scott Ritter. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.